All right, Rabbi, good morning. Today's daf is Chaf Dalet 24. We are picking up on Chaf Gimel Amudbeis 23b, and we are picking up at the two dots. Ubilvad Shelo Yaktim Amar Rava. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lines up from the bottom. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's shir, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan, Frank and Debbie Spector, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this month with incredible gratitude to the entire Kehillah, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan, Paul and Kathy Pollack, in memory of Paul's father, Shmuel ben Zechariah, his mother Sarah Bas Avram, great-grandmother Cyril Bas Reb Dov. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Mordechai and Malki Tusk, and for dedicating the shiurim this week in honor of Brina's marriage to Ari Nierenberg this past Tuesday. In the merit of our learning, may they be showered with all of the Sheva brachos and all of the brachos of the Ribono Shel Olam. We also thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Naftali and Bela Langer, for dedicating the shiurim this week in the Zechus of Refuah Shalema for Yisrael Zev ben Malka and Sarah Fega Bas Bela Susya. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, they will have a refuah together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. I will say with that, let us begin. A beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Rava says as follows: Man dirachim rabbanon, havale banin rabbanon. Whoever loves rabbis, right? Whoever loves, really this means Talmidei Chachamim. So whoever loves Talmidei Chachamim, ultimately again, will have children who are Talmidei Chachamim. So just to appreciate this goes back to what we were learning about yesterday. This is not like hocus pocus stuff. If you love rabbis, so you're going to have children who are Talmidei Chachamim. The idea is whatever you love in life becomes a focal part of your life. So if you love Torah, if you love Talmidei Chachamim, your children will see that you value that. And if your children see that you value that, then in Yirtzeh Hashem, they will try to, hopefully those same values will be embedded in their lives as well. Demoki Rabbanan, Havile Chasnusa Rabbanan. One who goes in and gives covet. So here I will say there are different girsaos actually. Some say it's the mokir, the dachel. Okay, so the one who goes in and gives covet to Talmidei Chachamim will have a son-in-law who's a Talmid Chacham. The dachel me Rabbanan, he gufei habitzora me Rabbanan. So this is very interesting. So the dachel, the Gra changes this to one who gives honor to Talmidei Chachamim, or again, one who fears Talmidei Chachamim, one who has awe and reverence. Ultimately, again, will become a Talmid Chacham himself. To which the Gemara says, "Ve'ilad bar hachi." But if this person is not capable of becoming a Talmid Chacham, which means, let's say someone just doesn't have the mental acumen, right? Not everybody has the same level of intellect. So let's say someone doesn't have the mental acumen for that, then mishtamin milei kitzur mirabanan. Then although he himself may not become an actual Talmid Chacham, but halacha l'maisa, his words will be heeded like a Talmid Chacham. Beautiful. V'lo b'shemen sreifa. So also getting back to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah said that halacha l'maisa on Shabbos, you can't use shemen sreifa for hadlakas neros. Says the Gemara, my shemen sreifa. What does it mean? Rabbi said now shemen sreifa literally means burnt oil. So what does that mean, burnt oil? My shemen sreifa. Amar Rabba, shemen shel truma shenitma. This actually refers to oil of truma oil, which became ritually impure, which became tamei. Then Rabbi say now, so what does that mean? Va'amai karu lo shemen sreifa. So why do they call it shemen sreifa? Hoil ula sreifa omeid. Ultimately, Rabbi say, because what do you do with truma oil, which becomes ritually impure? What do you do with it? You burn it. You burn it. Hence, it is called shemen sreifa. So the Gemara says, "Ub'Shabbos my time alo." So I don't understand, why can't you use it on Shabbos? What's the problem using this oil on Shabbos? So the Gemara says, "Mitoch shemitza alav levaro gzeru shemiyata." The concern I will say is that since there is a mitzvah to burn this oil, see, you might have a great chap. You could burn it, and maybe I'll just, I'll burn it. What's the problem? Since there's a mitzvah to burn it, the concern is you may come to tilt the oil towards the wick in an effort to accelerate the burning of the oil. So the Gemara says, "Me'ata b'yom tov l'shtari." So if that's the case again, that's only a problem by Shabbos. But by Yom Tiv, ultimately, again, it should be permitted. Yet, Alama Tanan, why did we learn this? We're actually going to see this Mishnah. This is our Mishnah on Amud Beis today. Alama Tanan, why does the Mishnah say, "Ei madlikim b'shemen sreifa b'Yom Tiv"? So why is it then that the Mishnah says you can't burn Shemen Sreif on Yom Tiv? To which the Gemara says, Gzeras Yom Tiv Atu Shabbos. So the Gemara says, because we're concerned, if we let you burn it on Yom Tiv, you may come to burn it on Shabbos. Rav Chisda Amar, L'Shema Lo Yata Lo Chayshinam. Rav Chisda says no. In fact, the reason there's no concern that if you burn Shemen Sreifa on Shabbos, you're going to come to tilt it towards the wick and accelerate the burning process. So what's the concern? Both say, what's the case of the Mishnah where the Mishnah says you can't use Shemen Sreifa? And that's a case of Yom Tov that falls out on Friday. Yom Tov that falls out on Friday, that's where the Mishnah says you can't use Shemen Sreifa for Shabbos candles. So now I have to remember, I have to light my Shabbos candles while it's technically still Yom Tov, which is fine. So I'm not. So now the Gemara is suggesting that when the Mishnah says you can't use Shemen Sreifa, that's talking about lighting your Shabbos candles on Yom Tov going into Shabbos. What's the problem with that? The fish shein surfing kachim be Yom Tov, and I will say, interestingly enough, the problem of using Shemen Sreifa for Shabbos candles is not a din in Shabbos, but rather it's a din that you can't light this oil on Yom Tiv. And why can't you light the oil on Yom Tiv? Lefi shein sarfin kachim be Yom Tiv. Because halach l'maisi, you can't burn invalid items on Yom Tiv. I have a hamid diktani seifa emar likin b'shem seifa be Yom Tiv. Michlal dereisha lab Yom Tiv. But 1 second. The next Mishnah, as we're going to see in Amud Beis, speaks about Yom Tiv. The fact that the next Mishnah speaks about Yom Tiv seems to indicate that what? This Mishnah is not speaking about Yom Tiv. Rabbi Chanina Misura, Ma Tam Kamar. Rather, Rabbi says we're going to see the two Mishnayos are linked. And in fact, again, our Mishnah makes a statement, and the next Mishnah explains why. So, Ma Tam Ema Likim B'Shem Sefer B'Yom Tiv. So, we'll say our Mishnah is teaching us that you can't go ahead and use Shemen Sreifa on Yom Tiv, and why not? Lefi shein sarfin kachim be Yom Tiv. Because halacha l'maisa, you can't go ahead and burn kachim on Yom Tiv. So both say, interestingly enough, it appears based on the discussion right now. So first of all, we've defined our terms. Shemen Sreifa means oil of invalid truma. Right, invalid truma that became possible has to be burned. So you would burn, that's called Shemen Sreifa, oil that's fit to be burned. And now what the Mishnah is teaching me is as follows. On a technical level, there is nothing wrong with using that oil on Shabbos. What's the concern? You're not allowed to burn that oil on Yom Tiv, because as we're going to see in just a moment, halacha l'maisa, you're not allowed to burn anything that is sacrificially or ritually invalid on Yom Tiv. So therefore, when the Mishnah says that you can't use Shemen Sreifa for Shabbos candles, that's actually talking about a case of Yom Tov that falls out on Erev Shabbos, and telling us that you can't, remember, so when Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbos, that means you're kindling, like we have this year. We're going to have Pesach Eretz Hashem this year. So remember, when you light Shabbos candles on Yom Tov, right, let's say first day's Pesach, well, it will be the second day Pesach, you're going to go ahead and light, you're going to light Shabbos candles, so you're lighting those Shabbos candles on Yom Tov. That, the Mishnah says, you cannot do. Why not? Because we don't burn kachim on Yom Tiv. Tanya Kav, so I'll say top of Chaf Dalid. Tanya Kav, I'll say Rav Chisda. We have a brayso that supports Rav Chisda. Kol elu she'amru in madlikin bohen b'Shabbos, madlikin b'mi Yom Tiv. All of the oils that we said you can't use on Shabbos, you can use on Yom Tiv. Right? Because remember again, all of the oils we mentioned on Shabbos you can't use. Why? Because Lamaisa, we're concerned that that they're not going to light properly, and you may come to adjust the heat source, thereby kindling. Well, technically speaking, kindling on Yom Tov is not a problem. Now, we don't start new fires, but manipulating existing fires is not really a problem on Yom Tov. So therefore, all of the oils that we said you can't use on Shabbos, you can use on Yom Tov, chutz mishemen sreifa. With one notable exception, we're going to see there's actually more than one exception, but with one notable exception, shemen sreifa, right? The oil of invalid truma. And why can't you use it on Yom Tov? Lefi she'ein sarfin kodshim b'Yom Tov. Because halacha l'maisa, we don't go ahead and burn invalid truma on Yom Tov itself. Good. So we'll say that closes out that sugya. Ibailu, we'll say very interesting sugya now. Mahu lahaskir Chanukah shel Chanukah b'Birkas Hamazon. Here we go. Are you obligated to make reference to Chanukah in benching? here the shaila, is there an obligation to insert some type of supplemental mention or paragraph for Chanukah in Birkas Hamazon? So do we say Kevan de midrabanan hu lo mid karinan? So on one hand we can say since Chanukah is midrabanan, therefore there's no obligation to insert anything into benching. O dilma mishum persumini samat karinan. Or on the other hand, maybe because there's pirsumanis. We got finished talking about all this over the last couple of days, that the entire essence of Chanukah is pirsumei nisa, publicizing the miracle. So maybe we'll say that part of that publicizing of the miracle is what? Including some type of mention of it in benching. So Amarava, Amarav Sechora, Amarav Huna, Eino Maskir. So we'll say comes along Rava, all these other rabbis, and say that halacha l'maisa, there is no obligation to make any mention of Chanukah in benching. But if you're going to make some type of mention of Chanukah, then what? Maskir b'hodah. You should include it in no delacha. Right? So we'll say, so again, that's just to keep symmetry. Right? So just like in Shmona Esrei, we go ahead and we add in Alanisim and Bimei Matisyo in Modim, in a section of Hoda'ah, of Thanksgiving. So too, if you don't have to add in anything in mentioning, the Gemara suggests, or the first opinion suggests, but if you're going to add in something, you should add it in the bracha of no delacha. Rafuna bar Yehuda ikla lebei Rava. So Rafuna bar Yehuda went to the house of Rava. Savar lad kuri b'bonei Yerushalayim. So apparently it was Chanukah, and he wanted to add in Alanisim or Bimei Matisyo, and he was going to add it in Bonei Yerushalayim. Amru Rav Sheshes said no, ketfila. If you're gonna add it in, you have to add it in like Shmona Esrei. Matfila b'hodah af birkas hamazon b'hodah. Just like by tefillah, the addition of Alanisim b'mimatasyo is in Modim, so too ultimately again by Birkas Hamazon it should be in the bracha of no delacha as well. So both say, so we know halacha l'mais, of course we do make an insertion. We do make an insertion in benching, and it is in fact in no delacha. The difference, of course, is that it's one of those additions that's not ma'akev. So, for example, if you were to go ahead and omit it, halacha l'maisi, we know that you would not have to go back and repeat for that particular omission. Iboilu. So the Gemara goes weiter. Mal b'haskir shalosh chodesh b'birkas hamazon. Ultimately, again, is there an obligation to make mention of benching, of Rosh Chodesh, in benching? So we'll say, so just so you understand the way this works a little bit. Well, let's finish this piece and then I'll go back. So are you obligated to go ahead and make mention of Rosh Chodesh in benching? Imtim slomar b'Chanukah d'Rabbanan lo tzarich. So maybe you'll say Chanukah, which is mid-Rabbanan, there's no obligation for an insertion. Rosh Chodesh d'Oraisa tzarich. But Rosh Chodesh ultimately again is d'Oraisa. Now we'll say, now what does mean Rosh Chodesh is d'Oraisa? Meaning the concept of Rosh Chodesh, right, is a biblical one, right? There is a biblical obligation for Rosh Chodesh. Or I should say, the concept of Rosh Chodesh is of biblical origin. So maybe therefore that should require an insertion in benching. O Dilma, Kevan de lo aser ba'asiyas melacha lo maskerinan. Or maybe we could say as follows, which is what? Since there's no Isra Malacha, right? Since on Rosh Chodesh, there's no prohibition to go ahead and do any kind of Malacha. Therefore, Halacha L'maisa, maybe I shouldn't go ahead and I'm not obligated to make any kind of insertion in benching. So we'll say, so what's the Halacha about Rosh Chodesh? So Rav Amar Maskir. Rav says that for Rosh Chodesh, you should insert a mention. Rabbi Chanina Omer Eino Maskir. Rabbi Chanina says you don't have to go ahead and make any mention. Amar Rav Zrika, Nokut derav biadech. So Rav Zrika said that ultimately really take the position of Rav, right? That halacha l'maisa, we make a mention of Rosh Chodesh and benching. Dekai Raboshia kavase, because Raboshia holds like Rav. The Tana Raboshia, here we go. Yomim sheish ben carbon musaf. Any day in which you have a carbon musaf. For example, Kigon, Rosh Chodesh, Chol Shal Moed, Arvis v'Shachres u'Mincha, Mispalo Shmona Esrei v'Omer me'ein ha'ma'ora ba'avoda. So we'll say any day that has a carbon musaf. For example, that's not active Yom Tov itself. So for example, Rosh Chodesh, Chalamayid. So any of those days, so remember Rosh Chodesh, Chalamayid both have a carbon musaf. Whether it's Shachris, or I should say Arvis, Shachris, Mincha, you daven Shmona Esrei, and what he calls mispala me'ein ha'ma'ora. Now we'll say me'ein ha'ma'ora ultimately means what? Omer me'ein ha'ma'ora ba'avoda. You go ahead and you insert something reflecting the unique nature of the day in avoda, which means in ritzei. Right before. Remember, ritzei is a section called avoda. So right by ritzei, you put in the assertion. Both say me'ein ha'ma'ora means a paragraph reflecting the unique nature of the day, what we have come to call Ya'ala v'yavo. If you look at Rashi says v'or me'ein ha'ma'ora levakish rachamim al Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim lahashiv avoda limkoma la'asos karbanos. So we'll say this is actually very interesting. I don't know that we give a lot of thought to this. We all know that you insert Ya'ala v'yavo by ritzei. Right between Ritzei and V'sechazena and Ena B'shuv Chalitzion B'rachamim. So why there? See, interestingly enough, Rabbi Shia explains, because the idea is, when do you insert Ya'ala v'yavo? Essentially on any day where there's a karban musaf. So what's most lacking on a day where there's a karban musaf? What's most lacking is the karban musaf, the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, we insert the supplemental paragraph that speaks out the unique nature of the day in the paragraph of Hasheves Havoda L'Divir Veisecha, requesting the restoration of carbonic service to the Beis Hamikdash. So again, we put that identity of the day right by the section of Avoda. So Rabbi Shia says, therefore, any day in which there is a karban musaf, you add in Ya'ala v'yavo in the section of Avoda. So the Gemara says, "Umispalo shmona esrei uve'omreina bavoda ve'im lo omar machzirin oso." And halacha l'maisa, on any of these days, if you did not go ahead and say Ya'ala v'yavo, we make you go back. Ve'im bahem kiddusha alakos, but yet nevertheless these days don't have any obligation of kiddush. Like, so, Rosh Chodesh has no obligation of Kiddush, Chalamayid has no obligation of Kiddush, the Yishpan has Kara Beberkas Hamazon. And Halach Lamaisa, not only do you insert Ya'ala v'yavo in Shmona Esrei, but you also insert Ya'ala v'yavo in benching. On the flip side, Yamim Shemban Karban Musaf, but days in which there is no Karban Musaf, Kigon, Sheni, V'chamishi, V'sheni, Mondays, Thursdays, and Mondays, we'll see what that means in just a moment, V'ta'utanios, and fast days, Uma'amados. And ma'amados. So we'll say, so just before we go on, what's ma'amados? Take a look at Rashi. This is really incredible. Kilomar, V'yomim shel ma'amados shayim mis'anin arba tanios b'Shabbos sheni u'shlishi u'revi v'chamishi u'me'ein hama'ora dido tfilas tainis. So we'll say, so very, very simply, the ma'amados, we know, not technically speaking, the karban tamid, right? The tamid shel shachar, tamid shel bein arbayim. The morning tamid, the afternoon tamid, those were karbanos tzibur, right? Those were communal offerings. And I was saying the halacha is, with any karban, the owner of the karban must be present at the time it is offered. But here's the problem: if you have a karban tzibur that's offered on behalf of collective Klal Yisrael, how do you have the owner present? So I'll say, so the answer was, you can't have every Jew present. So they had ma'amados. A maimad means a grouping. So what they would do is the same way there were 24 shifts of Kohanim, there were 24 groups of Yisraelim who ultimately represented the entirety of Klal Yisrael. These individuals would not come to Yerushalayim, rather they would gather in their own respective towns, and they had a whole series of fasting and tfilos and kriyas HaTorah. Their job was to represent Klal Yisrael, ultimately, again, so that the karban tamid should be offered up in the presence of the Jewish people. So the Gemara says over here, Sheni v'chamishi my avidetayu. What do you mean when you say Mondays and Thursdays? Ella Sheni v'hei v'bei shel ta'anio. So also remember again, in the event that there was a lack of rain, right? The lack of rain. So in Eretz Yisrael, they would have these Monday, Thursday, Monday fast days. Right, so the idea over here is, in these days, I will say, so that remember, so these are all examples of days. These are all examples of days where there's no karban musaf. There's no karban musaf, like these fast days, like ma'amados. So in these cases, arvis v'shachris u'mincha mispalo shmona esrei v'omer me'ein hama'ora b'shomea tefila. Then I will say, now watch this. However, on fast days, obviously there's no kiddush, there's no kiddush, there's no karban musaf, and Shmona Esrei, you would still insert something supplemental in Shema Kolenu. Now, what would you insert for Shema Kolenu? Anenu, like we do on a fast day today. So there's a supplemental insertion of Anenu. However, ve'im lo omar in machzirin also. But ultimately, again, if you did not say Anenu and Shmona Esrei, you do not have to go back. Ve'in bahen kedusha ala kos. Similarly, again, of course, there's no kiddush. So again, there's a whole discussion whether that line belongs there and what it means. We don't have to get into it. Ve'in bahen askara birkas hamason. But ultimately, again, and there is no obligation if you were to eat on these days. There is no insertion ultimately again in Birkas Hamazon. So Rabbi says, so halacha l'maisa. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, what comes out, we see that we obviously know how we pass. We do insert Ya'alav Yavav of Chanukah. We do insert Ya'alav Yavav for Rosh Chodesh. And I'll tell you something interesting. We saw this in Maseches Brachos a little bit earlier on. For tefillah in general, if you forget Ya'alav Yavav, you have to go back. The only exception to that rule is the night of Rosh Chodesh. Right? Night of Rosh Chodesh, if you omit Ya'alav Yavo, you do not have to repeat Shmona Esrei. And the reason for that is because just like Beis Din does not declare the new month at night, so too if you forget your declaration of Ya'alav Yavo at night, you are not obligated to go back and repeat. But otherwise, in every other situation, you do go back and repeat Shmona Esrei for the omission of Ya'alav Yavo. Interestingly enough, when it comes to benching and Ya'alav Yavo omission, so again, it's a bit more of an involved conversation what we're going to get into now, but suffice it to say for our purposes, when you have to go back is actually quite fascinating. You only have to go back, technically, when there's an obligation to have a Seudah. Only on a day where there's an obligation to have a meal. But on a day where there's no obligation to have a meal, on a technical level, one would not be obligated to go back and repeat benching for the omission of Ya'alav Yavo. But in fact, we'll see that actually a later sugya which is going to tackle this a bit more head on. So we'll say, what about, is there an obligation to make mention of Chanukah in Musaf? So we'll say, so just appreciate what's happening over here. This is talking about now either on Shabbos or Rosh Chodesh, right? So remember again, there's always a Shabbos Chanukah, and Rosh Chodesh Teves always occurs on Chanukah, which of course, Chanukah is always the 25th of the month, lasts for 8 days. So by definition, there's always a Rosh Chodesh. So listen to this interesting shayla. Is one obligated to insert Ya'alav Yavo, Alanisim, and Bimei Matisyo in Musaf of Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos? So just so you understand what the Gemara is asking, Chanukah itself does not generate an obligation for Musaf. Why not? Very simple. Chanukah didn't have a karban musaf. Right? That's it. Chanukah is a rabbinic holiday. The only time you have a karban musaf, again, is for a biblical Yom Tiv. Chanukah never had a karban musaf. So the interesting shayla is, Chanukah therefore does not generate an obligation for tfilas musaf. If Chanukah doesn't obligate an obligation for tfilas musaf, then do you have to make a Chanukah insertion by musaf on Shabbos or musaf on Rosh Chodesh? To which the Gemara says, do we say, so on one hand, since Chanukah doesn't generate this almost of obligation, we don't have to mention it. Or do we say no, that the obligation to insert Alanisim and Bimei Matisyo is in any tefillah you daven on that day? In other words, I will say, the Chanukah insertions are a din in the tefillos of the day. So whether the day has 3 tefillos or whether the day has 4 tefillos, ultimately, again, there's an obligation to insert Alanisim. Rav Huna of Rav Yehuda Damri Tarbayu Eno Masker. So Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say you don't in Musaf you don't mention Chanukah. Rav Nachman Rav Yochanan Damri Tarbayu Masker. Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan say yes, you do mention Chanukah in Musaf. So watch this. Amar Abaye, Samar Abaye, Rav Yosef. So by it Rav Yosef. Had Rav Huna v'Rav Yehuda. The Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, who ultimately hold that there is no obligation to make mention of Chanukah in Musaf of Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos. That's reflecting the view of Rav. What did Rav say? The Amar Rav Gidol Amar Rav. Rosh Chodesh Shechalios b'Shabbos. If Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, the Maftir ben Navi, so one who goes ahead and reads the Haftorah, Maftir ben Navi b'Shabbos, Ein Otzarach lahaskir shel Rosh Chodesh. So also interestingly enough, Rav said that when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos and you're reading the Haftorah at Shabbos, you're reading the Haftorah, when so when you conclude the Haftorah, what's the bracha? Nekadesh Shabbos, right? So Rav says that when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, there's no obligation to make mention of Rosh Chodesh in the bracha, in the concluding bracha of the Haftorah. Why not? She'ol mali Shabbos ein navi b'Rosh Chodesh. For were it not for Shabbos, there's no din of the Haftorah on Rosh Chodesh. So what's he hear what Rav is saying? So Rav is saying when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos and you're concluding the Haftorah, in the concluding bracha of the Haftorah, you need not make mention of Rosh Chodesh. Why not? Because halacha l'maisa, Rosh Chodesh itself, were not for Shabbos, there would be no Haftorah. Rosh Chodesh has nothing to do with Haftorah. Rosh Chodesh doesn't generate an obligation for Haftorah. So if Rosh Chodesh doesn't generate the obligation for Haftorah, therefore, there is no obligation to mention Rosh Chodesh in the Haftorah. So the Gemara is suggesting that this opinion of Rav is in fact the basis for the position of Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. Namely, that just as Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say, so they say you don't make any mention of Chanukah in Musaf, right? What's their logic? Their logic is the only time you make mention of something is when that day triggers or generates the obligation. But if the day doesn't generate or trigger the obligation, there's no need to make mention. Chanukah doesn't trigger a Musaf obligation. The Musaf obligation is related to either Shabbos or Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, again, they hold that just like when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, you don't have to mention Rosh Chodesh in the Haftorah because Rosh Chodesh doesn't generate the obligation for Haftorah. So too, on Chanukah, on Rosh Chodesh Chanukah, or on Shabbos Chanukah, there is no obligation to make mention of Musaf, of Chanukah in Musaf, because Chanukah doesn't trigger a Musaf obligation. To which the Gemara says, come on, that's not a good comparison. Me dummy. Hasam Navi b'd Rosh Chodesh like a cloud. We'll say, here's the difference. There's no concept of Haftorah by Rosh Chodesh at all. Ha isei be'arves v'shachres u'mincha. See, Rabbi said by Chanukah, everyone is agreeing that what? You are inserting Alanisim and Bimei Tesyahu where? In Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. So the only shaila is Musaf, meaning one thing we know for sure, the machlok is only regarding a fourth tefillah, but for the other three, everyone agrees, of course, that what? You are inserting Alanisim in those tefillos. To which the Gemara says, Ela lahad damya. So rather it's comparable to the following case. The Amrav Masna, Amarav Yom Tov Shechalios b'Shabbos. When Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, Hamaftir ben Navi b'Mincha b'Shabbos ein tzarich lahaskir shel Yom Tov. When you do the Haftorah by Mincha on Shabbos, you don't have to mention Rosh Chodesh. Why is that? Or, I'm sorry, you don't have to mention Yom Tov. Shel Mali Shabbos ein Navi b'Mincha b'Yom Tov. For were it not for Shabbos, there would be no Haftorah by Mincha. I will say, what Haftorah by Mincha? So it's actually quite fascinating. If you look at Rashi says, Hamaftir ben Navi b'Mincha b'Shabbos, Matzasi b'Tshuvas HaGeonim, Shahayu Regilim Likros ben Navi b'Shabbosos Mincha Asara Psukim. I'll say it's fascinating. It used to be that by Shabbos Mincha, they used to read Haftorah. They used to read Haftorah. A 10 pasuk Haftorah. A 10 verse Haftorah, that was it. What happened? We made Parsiim Gazru Gzeira Shelo Lasos. And in the days of the Persians, something happened, and they made a Gzeira, they made a decree not to do this. I will say, now what exactly happened? In the Hagos, it's, they say Gazru Shmad. Some say that there was some type of anti-Semitic legislation, Shmad, and therefore they stopped doing it. And interestingly enough, even once the anti-Semitism passed, the practice was never really reinstituted. Tosfos happens to say over here a little bit different. Tosfos says over here that they weren't reading Navi, but rather their institution was to read Ksuvim. That whereas the Haftorah comes from the Nevi'im, by Shabbos Mincha, they would read some selection of Ksuvim. Okay, either way, there used to be a practice to go ahead and read a very small haftorah by Shabbos Mincha. So for example, Rav says over here that when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, when you say the concluding bracha by Shabbos Mincha, by the Haftorah Shabbos Mincha, you don't have to mention Yom Tov. Why don't you have to mention Yom Tov? Because Yom Tov never generates an obligation for afternoon Haftorah. That is only said where? That's only said by Shabbos. So therefore, again, same idea. Chanukah never generates an obligation for Musaf, and therefore halacha l'maaseh there's no obligation to mention Chanukah by Musaf of Shabbos Chanukah or Shabbos Rosh or Rosh Chodesh Chanukah. Amud Beis, v'les hilchasa kechol hani shmaisasa. So we'll say in reality, the halacha does not follow any of these opinions. Now Rashi says, or kechol hani shmaisasa, Rav Huna, v'Rab Yehuda, v'Rab Gidlo, v'Rab Achtaboi, Ela kitfila achas kach haverta v'chol davar hayom umasker. So we'll say therefore the Gemara says really the halacha doesn't follow all of these opinions. And on Chanukah we make all of the tfilos of the day uniform, which we'll say on a very simple level means we say la ya'alev yavo each and every day. Ya'alev yavo each and every day. That at the end of the day halacha l'maisa, just like you go ahead and you're going to recite Ya'alev Yavo and Shachris and Mincha and Ma'ariv, so to halacha l'maisa you will go ahead and recite Ya'alev Yavo in Musaf as well. Eloki had Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi. So we'll say rather again reflects to Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi. What does Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi say? Yom Kippurim shechalios b'Shabbos. If a person goes ahead on Yom Kippur that falls out on Shabbos, Hamispalel me'ila zarach lahaskir shel Shabbos. Supposed to listen to this. So Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi say when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, so when you daven ne'ilah. Now remember again, ne'ilah is a unique tefillah that only applies to Yom Kippur and does not apply to Shabbos. So Rabbi says now the shaila is when I daven ne'ilah, what's my obligation vis-a-vis Shabbos insertions? To which the Gemara says that when you daven ne'ilah on Shabbos, you have to make mention of Shabbos in ne'ilah. Why? Yom hu shenis chayi ba'arba tfilos. Ultimately, again, it is a day in which you are obligated in 4 prayers. We'll say, so essentially what the Gemara says is like this. Really, the way we begin to look at things is, we look at the identity of the day. And whatever the identity of the day, that identity becomes manifest in all of the respective tefillos. So therefore we'll say, see, really what the tension was is like this. When let's just take Shabbat, let's just take Rosh Chodesh Chanukah for just a moment. So near Rosh Chodesh Chanukah, so there are 2 ways of looking at it. It's Chanukah. The fact that there's another additional identity of Rosh Chodesh doesn't mean it's Chanukah. So if it's Chanukah, that means that identity must be manifest in all the tefillos of the day. Or do we say no? It's true that it's Chanukah, but when you daven Musaf Rosh Chodesh, it's not Chanukah. Because for Musaf Rosh Chodesh, really, if you think about it, has nothing to do with Chanukah. Musaf of Rosh Chodesh is a din in Rosh Chodesh. V'haraya, Chanukah itself does not go ahead and generate any obligation for Musaf. So we'll say, so that's the tension. Do we say it's Chanukah? The day is Chanukah. The calendrical identity is Chanukah. Therefore, anything that happens on this day, right, in that framework, in that box, must reflect the identity of Chanukah. Or do we say, no, we look at the identity of the prayer, not necessarily the identity of the day. So what the Gemara now is coming to the conclusion is, we look at the identity of the day. And once you know the identity of the day, that identity must be manifest in every tefillah of the day. So therefore, for example, the Gemara says over here that when your kippur falls out on Shabbos, you're going to make Shabbos insertions. Even by Ne'ilah. Why? Because it's Shabbos. And since it's Shabbos, therefore halacha l'maisa, that identity of Shabbos must be manifest in all of the tefillos. To which the Gemara says, well, I have a problem. Kashe hilchasa hilchasa. We have a contradiction now between the halachas. Why? Amrit hilchasa Rabbi Shmuel Levi. So you just got finished saying that really the halacha follows Rabbi Shmuel Levi, because Rabbi Shmuel Levi teaches us that the identity of the day must be manifest in all of the tefillos of the day, even if some of those tefillos are not triggered by the core identity of the day. And on the other hand, v'kaimalon hilchas akarava. but we also paskin like Rava. What did Rava say? Dama Rava, Yom Tov shechalios b'Shabbos. When Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, Shliach Tzibur hayored lifnei ateva arvis eino tzarich lahaskir shel Yom Tov. So this is actually very interesting. So this is really fascinating, actually. So Rabbi says Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos. What's the halacha? The Shliach Tzibur need not make mention of Yom Tov in his quote-unquote Chazaras Hashatz. She'ol Mali Shabbos in Shliach Tzibur Yored Arvis B'Yom Tov. Now I will say, now what is this talking about? Take a look at Rashi when we see Chazaras Hashatz by Mariv. Watch this. Shliach Tzibur Yored Arvis Hamispalal Birkas Me'in Sheva Kunei Shemayim Ba'aretz Magin Avos B'Dvaro. So remember again, Shabbos night by Mariv, right? Which is mean Friday night, Mariv. We have a very interesting dynamic. What's the interesting dynamic? So halacha l'maisa, there is like a mini chazar sashatz. So the Gemara is saying that's a din in Shabbos. So for example, when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, there is no obligation to make mention of Yom Tov in that mini chazar sashatz. Why not? Because were it not for Shabbos, there would be no mini chazar sashatz. So we know Yom Tov, right? You have Ma'ariv and Yom Tov night. You don't have Magin Avos, right? You don't have that truncated form of chazar sashatz of the brach of Avos that goes into Magin Avos and Elokim Avos. You don't have any of that. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, you need not make mention of Yom Tov. So both say, so now we have a contradiction. Because what did you just say? We just said that halacha of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says that what? The identity of the day must be manifest in all of the tefillos of the day. So that's statement number one. And then right afterwards, you know, the halacha is like Rava. That when you have Shabbos and Yom Tov coming together, you need not make mention of Yom Tov in the truncated Chazaras Hashatz of Ma'ariv of Shabbos. So which one is it? So Hachi Hashdasam Bidinu Dafilu B'Shabbos Namilo Tzarach. So what's the Gemara? I'll tell you why. In reality, you really shouldn't even have a truncated Chazaras Hashatz on Ma'ariv of Shabbos. Well, this is an interesting idea. Why do we have a truncated Chazaras Hashatz, Chazan's repetition, on Friday night Ma'ariv? Why do we have that? So in reality, you shouldn't have it. So why do we have it? The rabbis instituted it because of sakana, because of danger. Now I want to show you an incredible Rashi, which gives us also a window into historical practices. Look at Rashi. Mishum sakana. Rashi says, mazikin. Shelo hayu batei knesio shelahan b'yishuv. Remember, their shuls were not usually inside the habitable areas. Their shuls were situated out of the towns, in the fields. V'chol sha'ar leili hachol hayu asugim malachton ubegamran malachton mispalin arvis bibatein v'lo hayu ba'im b'beis hakneses. Both say this is really quite fascinating. So the Gemara suggests during the week, it's fascinating. People come home from work. People would daven Ma'ariv at home. Fascinating. People apparently would not come to shul. Don't get any ideas, right? I say, in the shuls we open, we're going to be running mamish. I think if there's one thing that all of us have hopefully been makabel upon ourselves, is that in Mersa, when we are able to go back to shul, that we have to be so makbid on tefillah b'tzibur and try not ever again, if at all possible, to never again miss minyanim, because the pain that we feel over not being able, it's beautiful that we're able to daven together over Zoom, but the acute pain that we feel over missing out tefillah b'tzibur, when our shuls we open up in Mersa B'karov to be makbid on tefillah b'tzibur, davening with a minyan like never before. But nevertheless, their practice historically was to daven Ma'ariv at home, with one exception, Shabbos night, everyone would come to shul, which obviously also makes sense because remember, Shabbos Ma'ariv you were often davening even earlier. So what happens? Aval leili Shabbos ba'im beis hakneses v'choshu sheyesh she'in memarin lava v'shon la'achar tefillah lekach erichu tefillah sativ. So we'll say, watch this. What were Chazal concerned about? They were concerned that there might be people who come late to shul Friday night. I know, crazy. Who ever heard of such a thing like this? Mamish, like happy curses, coming late to shul anytime? Impossible. Okay, there are some people who are spiritually challenged. Maybe they come a little bit late to shul. So we'll say, what was the concern? The concern was that Tzibur is going to, let's be down the kafskos. Maybe there are people who just daven a longer shmona, so daven a longer kavana. What's the concern? The concern is that the tzibur's finished davening, tzibur's going to go home, which means there may be some people left in shul. Now that's a sakana, because if they're left in shul alone, that means they're going to walk home alone. The shuls are situated in more remote areas. So there was mamish a real concern that halach lamaisa people put themselves in sakana. So what did Chazal do? This is incredible. They prolonged Ma'ariv. They elongated Ma'ariv. This way giving people a little bit more time to finish up, to catch up. This way no one has to walk home alone on Shabbos night. So the Gemara says something very, very, really incredible. That really, make it adin, you don't need any truncated form of Chazaras Hashatz on Shabbos night. That's not necessary. The only reason the rabbis did it is that no man left behind, no Jew left behind. Nobody should go ahead and be left in the shul once davening is over and have to walk home on their own. Aval hacha, but over here, Yom Hushan is Chai B'Arba Tefillah. So therefore, Rabbi say, that's why the Gemara says that when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, we make no reference to Yom Tov in that truncated Kabbalah Shabbos, because that truncated Kabbalah Shabbos is not really a necessity. We did it to, it's not really an ikr of tefillah. So therefore, again, it was just an add-on to keep people in shul a few minutes longer, so that no one should have to walk home from shul alone. That was the entire essence. Ultimately, again, of Magin Avos. But at the end of the day, that's why there's no mention of Yom Tov in that Magin Avos. But we'll say, by any other tefillah, the halachic paradigm is that we look at the identity of the day. And whatever the identity of the day, that identity must be manifest in each of the tefillos of the day, even if there is a tefillah that is not generated by the core identity of the day. Nevertheless, the core identity of the day is still inserted. So therefore, to say it simpler, we will say Alanisim and Bimei Matisyahu even on Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, even though Chanukah doesn't generate its own obligation for Musaf. Similarly, again, Musaf on Shabbos Chanukah will also insert Chanukah, even though again Chanukah does not generate the obligation for Musaf. Beautiful. Below Ba'aliyah, so we'll say you can't use aliyah. So remember again, going back to the forbidden oils. So aliyah was also a form of fat. So I says the Gemara, Chacham Hainu Tanakama, the Chacham is saying the same thing as Tanakama, Ika Benahu de Rav Barona. So we'll say the nafkamini will be the case of Rav Barona. So we'll remember again, Rav Barona had this interesting idea about, remember, you're not allowed to use congealed fat, right? Congealed aliyah or congealed fish innards. But if you go ahead and they are melted and you mix in some oil, so Rav Barona said it's okay. So apparently, again, one of the opinions, the Chachamim or the Tanakama, says that it's permitted if you mix in the oil, but we're not sure which opinion is which. Good, says the Mishnah. So we'll say you can't use, we'll say here, we just quoted this before, you can't use Shemen Sreifa on Yom Tov. Remember again, what's Shemen Sreifa? Shemen Sreifa, we already learned, is oil of invalid Truma. Truma oil became invalidated. The only thing you can do it with it is burn it, but you can't burn it on Yom Tov. Rabbi Shmuel says, "A madlikin be'itron mipnei kavod haShabbos." Rabbi Shmuel says you can't go ahead and use itron. So remember, we saw before that itron is, Rashi says, psulta de zivsa. Zivsa is pitch, so itron is the leftover, the residue from pitch. So Rabbi Shmuel says you can't use that to light Shabbos candles. Why not? So the Rashi says we're going to see, Gemara says, Mishnah says, covered Shabbos. I've covered the Shabbos. Rashi says, because apparently when you burn itron, it has a very bad smell. So we don't want you burning foul smelling oil on Shabbos. The Chachamim matir, and the Chachamim say ultimately again that you are permitted to do so. Again, we'll see the machlokes in the Mishnah. This thing where it says the Chachamim matir b'chal hashmanim. Chachamim say you can burn with any oil, b'shemen shumshmin, sesame seed oil, b'shemen agozin, nut oil, b'shemen sunonos, literally means radish oil, b'shemen dogim, with oil that comes from fish, b'shemen pakuos. Old Nabosai, now Rashi says pakuos is dalas, something from the gourd family. So gourd oil, we'll see what all this means. Be'itron, remember itron is the leftover of the zefes, itron is the residue from pitch. Ubenaft. and naft oil. Again, we'll define these items. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, ein madlikin b'shemen azayis pav. Rabbi Tarfon says, no, the only thing you are allowed to use for Shabbos ultimately is what? Shemen zayis. Right? That's all you're allowed to use is olive oil. Good, we'll see all of these halachas. Says the Mishnah. My taima. I will say, so why can't you use shemen sreif on Yom Tiv? Remember again, that is oil. That is the oil of invalid truma, right? Truma pasul. So why can't you use that on Yom Tiv? Lefi shein sarfin kachim be Yom Tiv, because halacha lemaisa we don't burn kachim on Yom Tiv. As we just saw that before. Min hanimi. This. Say, how do I know that we don't burn kachim on Yom Tiv? Amar chizke v'chitan bechizka. Amar kra. I suppose it's incredible. Where is this learned that from? Sosiru mimenu ad boker. We'll say carbon pesach. You may not leave over any of the carbon until the morning. Then we'll say, now what does the pasuk say? Vanosir mimenu ad boker ba'ish tisrofu. And anything you leave over on the morning, you have to burn. So we'll say the Gemara makes a very important drasha. So the Gemara says, boker vanosir mimenu ad boker she'in tamud lomer ad boker ma tamud lomer ad boker ba'akasov litin lo boker she'ini l'sreifaso. So we'll say it's very interesting. The pasuk says, don't leave anything over until the morning. And anything you leave over to the morning, you should burn. That both say, technically speaking, that second ad boker is extra. You don't need that ad boker. So it says, that ad boker teaches you that when are you burning your leftover carbon pesach? On the second morning. See, when you read that pasuk, you might think that what? When are you burning carbon pesach? I will say, when are you burning carbon pesach? On the first morning of Pesach. You didn't eat whatever you don't eat the night of Pesach. You should burn that morning, i.e. the first day of Yom Tiv. Therefore, the pasuk comes along and gives a second ad boker, a second morning to say, no, you don't burn the leftover carbon Pesach on the first day of Pesach. Rather, when do you burn leftover carbon Pesach? I will say, when? First day Chalamayid. Why? What do you see from here? Because you don't burn leftover or invalidated carbonos on Yom Tov itself. Hence, the inability to use shemen sreifa on Yom Tov. Alright, so we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up in Meretz Hashem with this discussion. Tomorrow, Maishi, whenever you are ready, you'll start Shachris. Shkoyach Abosai. Jeremy, if you could send me the list of people who were on today, that would be great.